Hey everyone, Daniel here from growyourmusicstudio.com. As usual, I've got a lot in my mind. I'm not sure if it's going to come out very well, but I want to tell you a little bit about the question that I'm posing in this video. I want to ask the question and want to tell you how I've answered it in my own studio and how I've seen other studios answer it. And the question being, do kids struggle in a group program, or are we all just lying to ourselves and not admitting the fact that group instruction, when it comes to the early years of a child learning a musical instrument, group instruction is somehow substandard? That's the question. In this video, I'm going to talk about that question. I'm going to tell you how I solved the problems that lead people to ask that question. Of course, the question doesn't get asked because people are making it up. The question gets asked because people to the depth of their soul feel that this is true, and they have good reasons for feeling that. So I want to tell you how I've answered it in my studio, how I've seen other people answer it. And I want to show you a principle that will help students accelerate in a studio, whether it's group instruction or not, and how applying this principle in a group environment actually works better than applying it in a one-to-one environment. So this is what I intend to cover in the video today. And just as a bit of background, I know many of you who watch are familiar with my story, but I did not come into group instruction purposefully. I very much backed into it. So I want to give you my background so you know why I'm answering this question the way that I am. I started out by writing curriculum for summer camps. These were group interactions for 24 children at a time, and teaching children how to play music in the environment of a group. And I started out by writing curriculum that way, and it was working so well, my curriculum partner and I naturally asked the question, could we do this year-round? Kids are getting a better result here in the summer as we're writing these summer camp curriculums. Could we actually do this year-round in the context of a year-round program that instead of meeting daily, meets week to week? And that's kind of how I, over the last 10 years, have well, 15 now, I'm getting older. That's how over the last 15 years, I've really come to understand what I understand about group instruction. So that's a little bit of my background. The other thing is that it's one thing for me to have implemented this within a camp that I invented. Another thing to implement this with my studio. I've now at this point over the last 18 months, helped 55 studios convert to a group instruction model. And an unusual one at that, and I'll get more into that in a little bit later in the video. But having said that, what I will tell you is that many people desire to start group instruction in a music studio, whether it's piano, that's primarily the kind of group instruction that most people want to do, but obviously violin and guitar, there's opportunities there as well. But many people want to start that, but there's things holding them back. And I found the number one thing that holds people back is not curriculum or equipment. It's honestly the beliefs of the studio owner. And in many cases, it's just pure fear. There is this just huge mental block that studio owners have about making a transition like that. They're afraid of a studio mutiny. They're afraid of, will the students do as well or not? I don't even know how to do this, what curriculum I use. But the number one thing that stands out to me of all of these various problems that studio owners bring up is the question, don't kids struggle in a group program? Don't we all know it's substandard? This is the question I asked at the beginning. I actually even had a teacher who hired me to consult for their studio, who after beginning to work with me, but before they had achieved results, before they had completely converted over, before they had implemented the format, they were in such a fearful place that they even said, this is just a scam. Like, I am scamming all the families in my studio. And they weren't saying this out of a place of negativity. Well, maybe they were, but it wasn't a place out of cynicism. It was a place of just genuine fear. And this is the entire reason why I'm doing this video today, is that if this is true of someone who had the guts to pull the trigger, this person had the guts to pull the trigger, they invested in the equipment, they invested in time and money and energy and effort into working with me. And even on the eve of getting ready to start something that just a month later she was ecstatic about, she had these huge doubts. So the purpose of this video is to answer this question, but in a deeper way, to help studio owners who have fear around pulling the trigger, to help them overcome those fears. So here's another thing. I have to bring this up. It would be inappropriate for me not to at this point. I have strong opinions. The reason I have strong opinions is that I've been doing this for 10 years, okay? And I make it a habit not to argue with people when they're committed to a belief. So if someone's committed to the belief that group lessons are substandard, or in some way you can't get a good result out of children, if you're watching this video and that's where you're coming from, and you're even considering, starting a debate in the comments, that's fine. I grant you your opinion. My experience hasn't borne that out, and so I don't really make it a habit of trying to convince people to my viewpoint. My goal really here is to put out into the world my experience and what I've seen to be true, and even some of the how-to of overcoming these problems. If you want to take that and run with it, great. But if you're coming from a place of just deep belief that this can't work, I'm sorry, I probably am not going to be too helpful for you, because I just don't. I don't live in a world where I feel like it's necessary for everyone to agree with me. So anyway, hey there, Martha. Thanks for watching. So having said that, let me just move on and say that the interesting point is that when people who want to do group don't do group, when they don't act, the unfortunate thing that most studios do is either A, to not act, or B, to resort to half measures, okay? And I want to address these first before I actually get into how to solve that problem that I mentioned earlier, the question, the whole premise of this video. I want to talk about some of the problems that most studio owners get themselves into because they believe this, what I'll just call a lie, that somehow group is substandard. First off, the big one is that they don't act. They just stick to a private lesson program. That's fine. That's great. I held on to my private lesson program for a while. After a certain point, I began to realize that no matter how fast I could get a kid through a book, no matter how quickly I could get them to understand new concepts in music in the context of a one-to-one lesson, that I could never get them to move as quickly than if they had been in group. So in other words, if I'd taken that same kid and put them in a group from the beginning, I could have gotten them through faster. So again, if you want to stick to a private program, great, that's awesome. I want to move quickly from that one. Here's another one. A lot of teachers have a lot of teachers, when they move to group, they have a lot of fear around what to do. And so they will often resort to going to a very heavy-handed, regimented, strict group curriculum that has a definite scope and pace. And trust me, I have nothing against a curriculum of that kind. We did that in the summer camp environment. But that was very helpful for a very short, defined period of time. The reality of the situation is that kids begin to distinguish themselves. They distinguish themselves as overcommitted. So the kid sitting right here is just as hard a worker as this kid here, but this kid's in 6 other activities, this kid isn't. Which one of those kids do you think is going to move faster? Now you've got a problem. And speaking of work ethic, you might have, I can think right now of 2 students that started at the exact same time in the same group, and the girls were both the same age, 8. One of them completed the entire Faber series in one of my groups in just over 20 months, and the other one took almost 4 years. And the difference was in the parents and the kind of parenting style that those parents had, because I saw a huge difference there. And the difference was in the interest level that each individual girl brought to the situation. My point is that oftentimes, as a half measure, teachers will resort to these incredibly regimented curriculums, and it gets them in trouble because what ends up happening is that it holds your best kids back, and it drags along the kids who aren't as committed, kicking and screaming into the future, and they're having a bad experience. And only a small sliver of kids in the middle are actually getting a great experience of the group. And so the teacher looks at the kid that's being held back by that regimented curriculum, and this, I feel, is where this idea comes from, that somehow group is substandard, that it holds kids back. Yeah, if that's how you do it, of course it will. And so for me, as I was inventing the year-round version of what I now do and have done for the last 10 years, to me, I had to have something that could allow two kids to sit side by side and have one child be able to finish, the Faber series, which is a 4-year series, many people will say. I needed to have that kid finish in 20 months while that other child finished it in the average time. And how would I go about pulling it off? And I'm going to get to that at the end of this video, but I want to talk about 2 other half measures that teachers get themselves into trouble by trying to start with. The other thing is trying to go, not fully committing to the group structure, wanting the benefit of having more kids at once, but not having the guts, if you will, to go full out. So they'll do things like 20-20-20 lessons. And again, nothing against 20-20-20 lessons, but you're not getting the full value of what's possible. You're not able to scale up. You're limited to 3 at that point. And some of the studios that I mentioned earlier that have worked with me in converting over to a group structure in this more independent way that doesn't require a regimented curriculum, they have gone up to 6 or 7 students at a time. You just can't do that in an environment like that. Same thing with what some people call lab time, where you have one student stay just a little bit extra and they're playing on a computer or an iPad. Again, it's a great tool. It does have benefit, but it's not group. It's not appropriating the full value of what you could be in your studio. Okay. Another thought, last one. And this is another thing that teachers do. They give up on trying to keep all the kids together in the group. And what they resort to is, and again, I'm only saying this from experience. I'm not calling any particular teacher out. I've had opportunity to talk to hundreds of teachers over the last couple of years as a result of them reading my blog and reaching out to me, and have had a lot of people, write into me by email and try to troubleshoot. And something that some teachers have resorted to, or some studios have resorted to, has been they do empty calories activities. In other words, they throw in the towel, they say it's impossible for all these kids to stick together, so I guess we're just going to do some fun activities throughout. And again, nothing against having fun. I like having fun. I'm having fun right now. But the problem is that you're not helping those kids move forward. Playing the same flashcard review game for the 8th week in a row might be fun for the kids, and they might really beg you to do it, and there is some educational value, but it isn't as valuable as other things you could be doing with that time. And so purely as a comparison, I just want to point out that, again, this is how group gets that substandard, this reputation of somehow being substandard, or somehow kids being held back, or that kids can't do as well. So what is the solution? All right. And this is where I really want to go, and this is kind of the driving force behind my thought in creating this video for you today. There's a term I coined about 10 years ago, and I've used it. I don't know if I've actually ever used it on the blog. I might have used it in some articles I wrote a couple years ago. They've actually even started to come into regular use now. There was a podcast made by a couple guys about a month ago where they actually used this term over and over again. This is something that I had actually spoken to one of these gentlemen about over a year ago. And the idea is this. In your business, in your studio, if you will stop approaching some of the problems that you have in your studio as if they're educational problems, but approach them as if they're a business problem, your creativity begins to free up, and you can start coming up with solutions that are a little unorthodox, a little outside the lines, a little unusual for our industry. And so as I began to think about the problem that I had in group and thought about it from the perspective of the parents, my thought was, how do parents measure success? And what occurred to me is that parents have a very simplistic definition of success. Think of the last time a parent had a problem with you and brought it up to you. And maybe, unrelated to, I'm not talking about, invoicing or rescheduling lessons. I'm talking within the educational content. It probably doesn't happen all that often, not nearly as much as when parents have run-ins with you over policy. Almost every time that I can think of when a parent brought a problem up to me or had a concern that they voiced to me about education, it has always been posed to me in one way and one way only. It seems like they're not moving through their book very fast. What's going on? And like the parent has a challenging attitude towards me. Really think about that. This is huge. This is how parents think about what we do. And we will come up with educational reasons for that, but from a business perspective, this is one of the few ways that parents measure whether your lessons are effective, because they don't know what your degree is. They don't know whether you're doing a good job teaching the curriculum or not. They can't make heads or tails of it, and they'll often tell you that. So the point I'm driving at here is that if you can solve what I call the practice problem, and you can show parents that kids are flying through their books, they really won't care all that much how you're getting that result. They'll just really love you for getting that result. And so 10 years ago, in my mind, I thought if I can solve what I call the practice problem, then I can pretty much write my own ticket here. That parents will most likely go along with whatever structure I choose to do. Well, it just so happens, and this is kind of where I'm going to end today, because I can't get into all of the educational things that surround solving that actual problem. But what I will tell you is that for me, the group structure actually helped me solve the practice problem in a way that was easier than a one-to-one lesson. That it was actually easier for me to get kids through their books faster in the context of a group as opposed to a one-on-one lesson with that same child, as I was mentioning earlier. Okay? So the solution then is, and again, what I'm about ready to say is probably a topic that I should cover in an hour-long video. I just don't have the time to do it here. I'm focusing more on answering the big high-level question here. But for me, the question is, for this kid, for this hour in this group, how many pages can we get through where they actually can learn all the music and even memorize all the music over this next hour? That's the question. That's the challenge for me. And so for me, the way that I structured my groups became, how do I structure everything so that it supports the dual skills of sight reading and memorization? And how can I do that in a way that group supports better than one-to-one lessons? Solving that problem completely changed my career. And furthermore, what I'll say to that is, a corollary question to that is it really a problem if you're helping kids get through their music in the context of your group program? Like, is that so bad? The idea of spending the majority of time on learning or enrichment or review, I mean, there's good reason for doing all that. But is it really all that bad if we keep kids' hands on the piano for the majority of an hour, where they're actually, under our supervision, learning to make music and doing so in such a way that they go home feeling like a winner? And we have now solved the parent's biggest problem at home, which is, how do I get these kids to practice? Practice almost becomes a moot point when those kids already leave the lesson with the music memorized. By the way, I'm not really giving away the secret sauce here. Every parent that comes in the studio, this is exactly how I explain what I do to them. And especially for parents who have had lessons in the past, their eyes kind of widen. And they say what I feel actually, which is, where was this when I was a kid? And so for me, the definitive answer to the question, are group lessons substandard? No, they're not. And for me, the proof is in the RCM test scores that kids bring back in my studio every single year. It's in the number of pages that kids cover. It's in the lack of regression from week to week in their lessons, the lack of backpedaling, not needing to have to consistently review week after week the same concepts so that they finally stick with kids. Having more time with the kids is always going to be a better option. And what I'm saying is that within the context of a group, it is actually very possible to get more time with the kids, do more with them, and have something that's very high quality that parents are incredibly delighted and happy to be involved with you on. So anyway, that's where I'm going to end for today. If you would like to read the new ebook that I wrote, it's free, by the way, you can download that. I'm going to post a link below. This new ebook that I've written is called How to Fill a Group Lesson Program. It's just more lessons that I've learned in my studio that I'm just sharing, very much like my Facebook guide. I spent a long time learning these lessons, and just happy to share them now. If you like this video, hit that like button, share it with a friend, leave a comment below, or ask a question. And if, especially right now, I'm doing a lot of videos and posts and emails around group lessons. It's the time of year that I'm thinking about it. It's actually the 10-year anniversary of when I conceived of my group lesson program in the form that it is now. If you have a question, I might actually make a video about it and to answer that question. So you could leave that in the comments below as well. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your attention. I really do. And I'll see you in the next video, which is going to come out probably sometime early next week. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. And I wish you all the best in your studio this year. Bye-bye.